When you look into maybe the history bit of blockchain, we had like the anarchists, and now we enter this institutional grade environment, and the risk mitigation framework is a great example where we bring together traditional players, but then also some blockchain protocols and industry leaders to build this framework.
What do you think the industry still misunderstands about the actual bottlenecks to institutional scale adoption?
People still looking at the technology side of things, whereas we see that technology has been evolved and matured quite heavily, but what is about the integration, how you can bring such a tokenized asset into the existing systems, considering the life cycle of a product. So whenever you have a tokenized asset, it comes with liability and rights, and those you need to comply with.
You said before that the United States won't be left behind in tokenization race. What signals are you seeing from regulators, banks, or market infrastructure players that support that view? Hi friends of CCN, thanks for joining today's chat with Sandro Knöpfel, Global Lead Market Structure and Strategic Partnerships at Cardano Foundation. Thank you, Sandro, for joining CCN today.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks for having me, Giuseppe.
So let's start with RWA tokenization and market structure. There's a growing narrative that tokenized RWAs could become a multi-trillion-dollar market. What do you think the industry still misunderstands about the actual bottlenecks to institutional scale adoption?
Thanks for the question. And yes, there is actually a thriving industry when you look into RWA and the tokenization. The biggest challenge I see, or maybe the misconception, as you said, is that people still looking at the technology side of things, whereas we see that technology has been evolved and matured quite heavily. But what is about the integration, how you can bring such a tokenized asset into the existing systems, considering the life cycle of a product. So whenever you have a tokenized asset, it comes with liability and rights, and those you need to comply with. And that's one of the biggest challenges we see to bring it into the integration cycle.
You said before that the United States won't be left behind in tokenization race. What signals are you seeing from regulators, banks, or market infrastructure players that support that view?
The US always had and always have as well as special standing when you look into the global economy, right? And it has the capital markets dominance, so this is what it has. And now with the new regulations you see coming up, they support like the stability or the dominance of the US dollar. That's one thing where we see a big push. But then also when you look into what happened back in December when the SEC provided the non-action letter to the DTCC, that's obviously a big signal of what happens when we speak about tokenization of real-world asset and financial products, and having the engine room, as I like to say, right, in financial markets and capital markets with the DTCC. This will definitely enable a big move in the US.
Just talking about regulatory competition between the Europe and the US, could excessive regulatory clarity actually become a disadvantage if it limits experimentation, particularly compared to the more market-driven US approach?
Would not say it's a disadvantage, right? There are two different roads you can go, and eventually it comes together because you need both. You need to have like this innovation-driven and fast-paced environment as you have in the US that has always been at the forefront. When you think back into big tech, with Silicon Valley, there's always been like the advantage of the US. And having this more regulatory, or that's a secure-driven approach by the EU, brings also a big trust for institutional partners to adopt into the technology, and we will see a conversion happening. And now this, as you call it, the race, right? I think it's a head-to-head race, but at the end of the day, it will come together, because when we believe into this global infrastructure, we also need to speak about global frameworks. And here it's relevant that we stay maybe out a bit of this domestic isolated view, but into a more global view, and this is where we see the conversion happening.
Cardano Foundation has contributed to the capital markets risk mitigation framework. What specific risks are institutions most concerned about when they evaluate blockchain infrastructure today?
Yeah, it's as we said, right? When you look into maybe the history bit of blockchain, we had like the bit more the anarchists, and now we enter this institutional grade environment. And the risk mitigation framework is a great example where we bring together traditional players like FMIs, where we have again DTCC, Euroclear, Clearstream, but then also some blockchain protocols and industry leaders to build this framework. And we do see that there are now coming these questions about governance risk. Consensus risk is also something. Then there are questions about how reliable and predictable are systems, right? Operational resilience becomes very, very important, but also third-party dependencies, because you in a public permissionless blockchain, you don't have the SLAs as they are used to have, and this is where a lot of clarity needs to be done for people to understand, or for institutions to understand how they can integrate.
Talking about Cardano strategy and the direction that the industry is taking, Cardano is historically positioned itself around rigor, formal methods, and long-term infrastructure. Do you think the market is finally starting to reward that approach after years dominated by speed and speculation?
Yes, thank you as well for this question. As said, I think the past showed a lot of hype, right? Where we have seen the hypes driving the markets, and now with more clarity, with more institutional grade collaborations as well, things like predictability and reliability becoming more interesting. So we are focusing on auditability with the use cases we also had with the vLEIs, Verifiable Legal Entity Identifiers, where we have seen an on-chain attestation through our auditor Grant Thornton. These are things which receive a lot of attention in the market because this is relevant, right? If you are not auditable, if you're not predictable, it's very hard for institutions to integrate, and it definitely receives more recognition than it did in the past, where a lot of things have been just driven by hypes. So I think the maturity definitely helps for resilient, reliable infrastructure to succeed and grow.
Let's say that we meet again in 3 years. What development in tokenized finance will most convince you that blockchain has truly crossed into mainstream capital markets?
Probably when it's not the topic anymore about blockchain, but when it's like in the engine room, when it's kind of an invisible infrastructure which runs, right? So it's not treated kind of as a separate industry, but maybe more kind of a fully integrated industry, because this is what success will look like. And we see this as an example in this conversion of AI and blockchain, where we see a project on Cardano which integrates blockchain in Cardano as an identity layer, as a trust layer. You can deploy an AI agent which has identity, verifiable credential, payment rails, but as a user, you don't see the blockchain. So it runs in the infrastructure layer, and this is where we'll see Cardano as a blockchain, but the blockchain as an industry succeeding in the future, where I see success in the future. So being in the infrastructure layer.
Perfect, Sandro. Thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. And thank you for the nice insights that you gave us today.
Thank you, Giuseppe. It was a great pleasure. Thanks for having me, and a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.